Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. Story 1. I never should have ignored the signs. The forest was trying to warn us in its own strange way. But by the time I understood what was happening, it was already too late. My name is Richard Harrison, and I'm a park ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. What I'm about to tell you happened in the summer of 1982, and it changed everything I thought I knew about nature. It started with the moss. As someone who spent 20 years studying plants, I know moss isn't supposed to grow in perfect circles or arrow shapes. But there it was, right on the ancient oak trees near my station, forming patterns that looked almost like writing, Atiwam. First I told myself it was just a trick of light filtering through the leaves. But deep down, I knew better. The changes in the forest came slowly at first. Walking my usual morning patrol, I noticed the plants glowing at dawn, not the normal green shimmer you get when sunlight hits the dew, but an eerie blue-green light that seemed to pulse from within the leaves themselves. I'd rub my eyes and the glow would fade, making me wonder if I was just seeing things. But I wasn't the only one noticing strange things. The other rangers started reporting weird stuff too. Jenny, our newest recruit, swore she saw a patch of wildflowers turn and follow her like sunflowers tracking the sun. Except these flowers moved way too fast, and it was midnight when it happened. The really freaky stuff began with the trees. One morning I found a perfect circle of young saplings that hadn't been there the day before. I mean perfect, like someone had used a giant compass to plant them. But these weren't any species I recognized, and trust me, I know every plant. In these mountains, their bark was almost black and their leaves had an odd metallic shine to them. Then there were the sounds. Everyone knows forests make noise. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, branches creaking. But these sounds were different. Sometimes the wind in the trees would sound like whispers, forming almost words that would slip away just as my brain tried to make sense of them. Other times, the normal forest sounds would suddenly play backwards, like someone had hit rewind on a tape recorder. The paths started changing too. I've walked these trails thousands of times. I could do it blindfolded. But suddenly, familiar routes would lead to completely wrong places. A trail I knew led to Cedar Creek would somehow loop back to the ranger station, even though I'd been walking straight the whole time. It was like the forest itself was moving, rearranging itself when we weren't looking. The worst part? The trees. They started growing in ways that defied everything I knew about plant life. One morning, I found a line of oaks that had somehow grown into perfect hexagons, their branches weaving together to form what looked like a giant net above the trail. No storm or disease could make trees grow like that. This was something else entirely, but it was the pollen that really got to us first. We all started seeing things, weird shadows that shouldn't be there, movements in the corner of our eyes. At first, we blamed it on the summer heat, or maybe some weird fungus in the air. I even took samples back to the lab, but they came back normal. Looking back, I realize now that whatever was in that pollen wanted us to see these things. It was like the forest was trying to prepare us for what was coming. Every instinct I had as a ranger and botanist told me something was deeply wrong. The forest had always been my home, my safe place. But now it felt like we were being watched. Not by animals or other hikers, but by the trees themselves. The entire forest seemed alive in a way that went beyond normal nature. It felt aware, conscious, and sometimes when the wind was still and the tourists had all gone home, you could feel it thinking. I should have reported it all to headquarters right away. Should have called in experts, closed down the trails, done something. But who would believe a story about geometric trees and glowing moss? They'd have thought I was crazy. And besides, I had no proof. Every time I tried to photograph the strange things happening, my camera would malfunction, or the pictures would come out blurry, so I kept quiet and kept watching, kept taking notes, Kept trying to make sense of what was happening to my forest. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have run. Run far and fast, and never looked back. Because the forest was changing, yes. But it wasn't just the forest. Something else was out there. Something that had been waiting a very, very long time to show itself. And it was about to change everything. Guess I should tell you more about myself, since you'll need to understand why I, of all people, got caught up in this mess. Before becoming a park ranger, I spent 15 years working for big drug companies, studying plants to make medicines. I was good at it too, finding new plants that could help sick people. But something happened 5 years ago that made me leave that life behind. I was leading a research team in the Amazon rainforest. We were looking for rare plants that might cure diseases. There were 6 of us, all expert scientists who'd done this kind of work before. But the Amazon, it's different from other forests. Bigger, older, and sometimes, I think, angrier. We were 10 days into our expedition when things went wrong. The local guide who was helping us suddenly got scared and left in the middle of the night. He kept mumbling something about the trees being awake. We should have listened to him. The next morning, 3 of my team members went to collect samples. They never came back. We searched for days, but it was like the forest had swallowed them whole. The police said they probably got lost or ran into dangerous animals. But I was there. I saw the way the vines had moved to block our paths, how the trees seemed to close in around us. No one believed me, of course. They said the stress and heat had gotten to me. Maybe they were right. That's what I tried to tell myself. Anyway, after that, I couldn't work in labs anymore. The sterile walls felt like a prison. I needed to be somewhere I could keep studying plants, but in their natural home. That's how I ended up here in the Smoky Mountains, becoming a ranger at age 41. The job suited me. I knew more about plants than most rangers, and I loved finding and documenting new species. The other rangers would bring me strange flowers or leaves they found, knowing I'd get excited about identifying them. Some called me the plant whisperer as a joke, but I didn't mind. Plants had always made more sense to me than people. Then Sarah got sick. Sarah was my wife. She loved the mountains as much as I did, always hiking with me on my days off. One day last spring, she came home feeling dizzy after a solo hike. Said she'd seen some beautiful flowers she'd never noticed before, tiny blue ones with silver spots. By that night, she had a high fever. 3 days later, she was gone. The doctors couldn't explain it. All her tests came back normal, but her body just shut down. Before she died, she kept talking about the flowers, how they'd seemed to sing to her, how their pollen had danced in the air like tiny stars. I spent months searching those trails, trying to find those flowers. I never did, but I started noticing other things instead. Things that reminded me of the Amazon, the way certain plants would grow overnight, how some trees seemed to react when you got too close. I started carrying more equipment on my patrols, special tools to measure plant growth, cameras to document anything unusual, sample bags for collecting specimens. Most rangers carry just basic gear, but I needed to know what was happening in my forest. My old research notes from the Amazon came out of storage. I had theories, crazy ones maybe, about plants being more aware than we think, about them having a kind of group mind, sharing information through their roots. Other scientists had laughed at these ideas, but now I'm not so sure they were wrong. I started seeing patterns. The strange things happening in the forest weren't random. It was like the plants were trying to tell us something. Or maybe warn us. I kept detailed notes tracking every unusual growth, every weird plant behavior. Looking back, I realize I was so focused on understanding what was happening, I never stopped to ask why it was happening, or what it might cost to find out. Sarah would have understood. She always said nature had its own way of talking to us, if we'd only listen. I think that's what I was trying to do. Listen. I just never expected the forest to answer back, and I certainly never expected what came next. It was a Tuesday morning in late June when the first real proof hit me in the face. Literally. Was checking the Mountain Loop Trail, one of our most popular hiking paths, when I walked straight into a wall of poison ivy. Except that poison ivy shouldn't have been there at all. This trail was clear yesterday, and poison ivy doesn't grow overnight. But there it was, thick as a curtain, blocking the entire path. And here's the weird part. When I tried to walk around it, the vines moved. Not swaying in the wind kind of moving. They reached for me like fingers trying to grab my jacket. I ran back to my truck and grabbed my camera. By the time I returned, the poison ivy was gone. Just gone. Like it had never been there. But I saw what I saw. After that, things started happening faster. Plants began reacting when people walked by, but not in normal ways. Flowers would turn away from the sun to face hikers. Branches would bend down low over the paths, even without wind. And the trails kept changing. I've walked these mountains for years. I know every twist and turn. But now, paths that should lead north would somehow end up going east. It wasn't just me getting turned around. Our GPS devices went crazy too. It was like the forest was playing a giant game of maze, shifting and changing when we weren't looking. One morning I found a patch of deadly nightshade growing right in the middle of a sunny meadow. Anyone who knows plants knows that's impossible. Nightshade needs shade to grow. But these plants were thriving in full sunlight, their purple flowers almost glowing. I took samples, lots of them. But every time I tried to study them in the lab, they'd wilt and die within minutes. It was like they only wanted to exist in the forest. Then the symbols started appearing. At first, they looked like random patterns in tree bark or moss. But after a while, I noticed they kept repeating. Spirals, triangles, and shapes I didn't have names for. They'd show up overnight, carved into trees or formed by suddenly growing vines. I started marking these locations on my map. After a few weeks, I realized all the symbols formed a huge circle in the forest. And at the center of that circle was an area we rangers called the Dead Zone, a place where no plants had grown for years. Except now it wasn't dead anymore. New plants were sprouting there, kinds I'd never seen before. They moved too fast, growing inches in hours instead of days. When other rangers got close to study them, the vegetation would form walls, blocking them out. It was like the forest had decided this area was off limits to humans. I tried to radio for help one day when I saw a tree actually uproot itself and move 3 feet to block my path. The radio just gave out static. Same with my phone. No signal. It was getting harder and harder to communicate with the outside world. The spores were the scariest part. Tiny yellow specks floating in the air that none of our equipment could identify. Rangers who breathed them in started losing time. They'd set out on a morning patrol, and suddenly it would be sunset, with no memory of the hours in between. Kept detailed notes about everything, but it was getting harder to write things down. My hands would shake every time I tried. Sometimes I'd open my notebook and find whole pages blank, even though I remembered writing in them. The other rangers were getting nervous. Animals were avoiding the forest now. We hadn't seen a deer in weeks, even the birds had gone quiet. The whole forest felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. One evening, as the sun was setting, I saw something that made all my theories about plant consciousness seem like child's play. I was checking the Dead Zone's borders when I noticed all the plants moving in perfect sync, like dancers in a ballet. They were forming a pattern, a huge shape on the forest floor. From ground level, it looked random. But I climbed a fire tower to get a better view, and what I saw from up there made my blood run cold. The plants had formed an eye, a massive, perfect eye, made of leaves and vines and flowers. And as I watched, frozen in place, that eye slowly turned to look right at me. That's when I knew we weren't dealing with just unusual plant behavior anymore. Something in the forest was awake. Something was watching us, and it was about to make itself known. I first saw it on a foggy morning. In early July, the forest was quiet, too quiet, and the fog seemed different, glowing with a faint green light. I was investigating another patch of those strange symbols when I heard something moving through the trees. At first, I thought it was a deer, but the movement was all wrong. It was like watching a shadow dance through leaves, except this shadow was solid. Then it stepped into a clearing, and I forgot how to breathe. It looked like something from an old story my grandfather used to tell me about the Jersey Devil. But different. This creature was part plant, part animal, and completely impossible. It stood tall as a bear on two legs, with a body that seemed to be made of twisted vines and bark. Where its face should have been, there was a tangle of flowers and leaves that kept shifting and changing. But its eyes were the same ones I'd seen formed in the forest floor. Deep, ancient, and terrifyingly intelligent. I should have run. Any sane person would have. But I'd spent my whole life studying plants, and what I was seeing changed everything. I thought I knew. So I stayed frozen, watching. The creature raised what might have been an arm, and the plants around it exploded into growth. Vines shot up from the ground, trees bent and twisted, flowers bloomed and died in seconds. It was controlling them somehow, like a conductor leading an orchestra. Then it looked right at me and released a cloud of spores. They sparkled in the air like golden dust, and before I could hold my breath, I'd inhaled some. The world changed. Could see everything the creature wanted me to see. The entire forest was connected, every plant linked to every other plant through an invisible web. And this thing, this entity, was part of it all. It could move through the trees like we move. Through air, could make plants grow or die with a thought. It showed me things, horrible things, beautiful things. I saw trees walking, flowers that could think, vines that could plan. I saw whole sections of forest reshape themselves into mazes, trapping anyone who wandered in. I watched as it created perfect illusions, using nothing but leaves and light. The spores wore off after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When my head cleared, the creature was gone, but it had left me a message spelled out in newly grown mushrooms. Not alone. Over the next few days, it appeared more often. Sometimes just watching from the shadows, sometimes putting on displays of its power. It could make toxic plants grow instantly, then vanish them away. It could bend trees like they were made of rubber, creating walls and barriers wherever it wanted. Once I saw it merge with a large oak tree, disappearing into the bark like it was walking through a door. Later, it emerged from a completely different tree half a mile away. The other rangers started disappearing into the living mazes it created. They'd come back hours later, shaken and confused, talking about impossible things they'd seen. Some quit their jobs. Others refused to go into the forest alone. I kept studying it, kept taking notes even though my hand shook every time I wrote. The creature seemed curious about me too. Maybe because I was the only one who didn't run. It started leaving me gifts. Strange flowers that glowed in the dark. Pieces of bark with complex patterns that looked like math equations. And more messages, always in mushrooms. Learn, watch, understand. I started to realize this thing wasn't just some monster in the woods. It was intelligent, ancient. And it had been waiting a very long time for someone to notice it. But then people started getting sick, the same way Sarah had gotten sick. And I finally understood what the creature really was. Not just a guardian of the forest, but something that had learned to use the forest as a weapon. It was testing us, teaching us, and not all of its lessons were gentle. The day I figured this out, I found one last message near my cabin, spelled out in bright red mushrooms I knew were deadly poisonous. Time to play. That's when I knew the real horror was about to begin. Everything fell apart on a hot Thursday afternoon in late July. I'd brought a team of 3 researchers from the university to study the strange plants. I thought having more scientists around would help us understand what was happening. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. We were exploring the dead zone, which wasn't dead anymore but bursting with those strange new plants, when the entity made its move. The air filled with golden spores, thicker than we'd ever seen before. Before anyone could put on their masks, my researchers started coughing. They dropped one by one, like leaves falling from a tree. Their eyes were open, but they weren't seeing our world anymore. They were seeing what the creature wanted them to see. I tried to drag them out, but vines burst from the ground, wrapping around their legs, pulling them deeper into the forest. I never saw those researchers again. I ran back, to the ranger station to call for help. But when Jenny and Mark, two of our most experienced rangers, came with me to search, the forest had changed completely. Trees had grown into walls, forming a maze that kept shifting and changing. We got separated within minutes. I heard their screams an hour later. The plants, they weren't just moving anymore, they were hunting. Vines would snap like whips, trees would suddenly bend and grab, flowers would release clouds of sleeping pollen. It was like the whole forest had turned into one giant trap. Through the gaps in the trees, I kept seeing the creature. It wasn't hiding anymore. It moved openly through its domain, directing the plants like a general commanding an army. Every step it took left a trail of instant growth, flowers blooming and dying in seconds, trees twisting into unnatural shapes, moss forming those strange symbols. I found Jenny's radio covered in a strange, glowing moss. Mark's flashlight was tangled in vines that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat. But Jenny and Mark, they were just gone. That's when I understood what I had to do. The creature wasn't just some guardian of the forest. It was trying to take over, to spread its influence. Those symbols we'd been finding, they were like a computer program, rewriting the forest's natural rules. And it was spreading. I had one advantage. My years studying plants had taught me their weaknesses. And every living thing, no matter how powerful, fears fire. It hurt me to do it. 20 years as a ranger, and here I was, about to burn down part of my beloved forest. But if I didn't stop this thing here, who knew how far it would spread? I got my emergency flares and a can of gasoline from my truck. Then I started marking a circle with the gas right around the dead zone where all this had started. The creature watched me the whole time, its flower face changing colors, red, purple, black. Just as I was about to light the flare, it showed me one last vision. I saw the truth. This thing wasn't just one creature. It was the first of many, an evolution of plant consciousness waiting to emerge all over the world. The forest wasn't being invaded. It was waking up, but it was waking up wrong. Angry, hungry. I lit the flare. The fire spread faster than any natural fire should. The creature screamed, not with a voice, but with the sound of 1,000 trees groaning at once. It tried to stop, the flames with walls of vines, but that just gave the fire more fuel. As the fire grew, I saw the creature start to change. Its plant parts burned away, revealing something underneath. Something old, something that had been hiding in the forest since before humans existed. Our eyes met one last time, and in that moment I felt its anger, its hunger, its promise to return. Then the fire reached the center of the dead zone, and the whole thing exploded in a cloud of golden spores. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. They said I was lucky to survive the forest fire. The official report blamed it on summer heat and dry conditions. Funny how people can explain away things they don't want to believe. The forest grew back eventually. New trees, normal trees. The dead zone stayed dead this time. But sometimes late at night I see flowers turning to watch me pass. Sometimes I find those symbols drawn in the morning dew. And sometimes when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear it whispering, "Soon." I still work as a ranger. Someone needs to watch for the signs, because the creature showed me the truth that day. It wasn't just one of its kind. There are others, sleeping in forests all over the world, waiting, growing, learning. And someday, they'll wake up. So if you're ever in the woods and see flowers growing in perfect circles, or trees moving when there's no wind, or strange symbols written in moss, don't stop to take pictures. Don't try to study them. Just run. Run while you still can, because nature is watching, and it's finally starting to watch back. Durituo. I never thought water could scream, but here I am, standing at the edge of Taylor Slough in the Everglades, watching the sunset turn the water into sheets of crimson, and I swear I can hear it crying out. My name is Elizabeth Morgan, and as a park ranger, I've seen plenty of strange things in these swamps, but nothing like this. The air is thick enough to chew, classic Florida humidity doing its thing. Mosquitoes buzz around my head as I crouch down to take another water sample. Something's wrong with the water here, and it's been getting worse for weeks. It started with small things. The water would ripple when there wasn't any wind. Places that should have been still as glass would suddenly churn like someone was stirring it from below. But today the water turned red. Not the normal reddish-brown you sometimes get from algae or soil. This is different. This looks like blood. I've worked in the Everglades for 6 years now, and the locals tell stories. The Seminole elders especially, they warned us about places where the water turns red. When the water bleeds, they said, stay away. I used to think it was just a story to keep kids from wandering into dangerous parts of the swamp. Now, not so sure. My testing equipment shows things that don't make sense. The water chemistry is all wrong. It's thicker than it should be, almost syrupy in some spots. And the wildlife, they know something's up too. There's a quarter-mile stretch of perfectly good swamp that no animal will go near. Not even the gators, and they're usually not picky about where they hang out. The mangrove trees are the worst part. Their roots usually drip with normal sap, but now I run my finger along one of the exposed roots and pull it back. The liquid is warm, red. It looks exactly like blood. The sun's almost gone now, painting the sky in purple and orange. Usually this is my favorite time in the swamp, when everything gets quiet and peaceful. But there's nothing peaceful about today. The water levels have been changing too fast, rising and falling like the swamp is breathing. And in the fading light, I can see something floating in the water. Some kind of organic matter I've never seen before. It looks almost alive. I pack up my testing kit with shaking hands. The stories the Seminole elders told are running through my head. Tales of something ancient in these waters. Something that could make the swamp itself come alive. Something that turned the water red right before people started disappearing. As I turn to leave, I hear a splash behind me. Too big for a fish, too deliberate for a gator. I spin around, flashlight ready, but there's nothing there. Just ripples, in the bloody water, spreading out in a pattern that looks almost like writing. I should radio this in. I should call for backup. But something tells me this is bigger than anything backup could handle. Whatever's happening here, I have a feeling I'm the only one who can figure it out. And I have a terrible feeling that time is running out. Back in my small office at the ranger station, I spread out my water testing equipment on the desk. The familiar sight of beakers and testing strips should make me feel better. But tonight they don't. My hands won't stop shaking as I think about what I saw at the swamp. Sometimes I wonder if I was always meant to end up here, studying the mysteries of water. Before becoming a park ranger, I spent 5 years as a Navy diver. That's where I learned that water holds secrets, deep, dark ones that most people never see. But nothing in my Navy days prepared me for this. I pull out my old research journal, flipping to the notes about Mike's disappearance. Mike was my research partner last year. We were studying unusual patterns in the swamp's water flow when the official report says he drowned. But I was there that day. I saw how the water moved. It wasn't natural. It was like the swamp reached up and... No, I shake my head. Scientists don't think like that. And that's what I am. A Marine. Biologist who happens to wear a ranger uniform. I've solved dozens of water pollution cases. Just last month I figured out why Fish Lake was turning green. Illegal dumping from a nearby factory. This is probably something simple like that. It has to be. But as I look at the water samples I collected today, I know I'm lying to myself. The liquid in the vials doesn't behave like normal water. When I tilt them, they move too slowly, like syrup. And the color, that deep, unnatural red, seems to shift and swirl even when the vials are perfectly still. I pull up my recent paper on my laptop, the one that almost got me laughed out of the last science conference. Collective intelligence in wetland ecosystems sounds crazy, I know. But I've spent years studying these swamps and I'm convinced there's something more going on. The way water moves, how plants and animals respond to changes, how everything seems connected. It's like the whole swamp thinks and acts as one giant organism. My testing kit beeps, analyzing today's samples. The results make no sense. The chemical composition is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's like the water itself is changing, evolving. The radio on my belt crackles, making me jump. Morgan, you still at the station? It's Dave, one of the night rangers. Yeah, I'm here. What's up? We've got reports of weird water movements near Gator Point. The water level dropped 3 feet in 10 minutes, then rose back up just as fast. You're our water expert. Want to check it out? I look at my watch. It's almost midnight. The smart thing would be to wait until morning when I can see better and have backup. But the samples on my desk are getting darker. The red is spreading, even though that should be impossible in sealed vials. And I can't shake the feeling that if I wait until morning, it might be too late. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I tell Dave, already reaching for my gear. Whatever's happening in my swamp, I need to face it. Even if what I find changes everything I thought I knew about science, and about what's really living in these waters. The drive to Gator Point is usually peaceful at night. But tonight, my headlights catch something strange in the drainage. Channels along the road, the water is flowing the wrong way. It should be heading south, but instead it's moving north against the natural slope. I pull over and shine my flashlight on the water. The beam catches something that makes my throat go dry. The water isn't just moving wrong. It's forming perfect circles, like someone's drawing them with an invisible finger. When I reach Gator Point, Dave is already there, looking worried. Take a look at this, Elizabeth, he says, pointing his flashlight at a patch of swamp water. The beam reveals thick red patches floating on the surface. I've seen red algae blooms before, but this is different. The red stuff moves when we watch it, clumping together like blood clots. I pull on my rubber gloves and take samples, trying to keep my hands steady. The water feels wrong, too thick, almost alive under my fingers. And it's not just the texture that's off. All around us, the swamp is acting strange. Water levels that should stay stable are rising and falling like massive breaths. Places that should be deep are suddenly shallow, and calm pools are turning into whirlpools without any reason. The animals are spooked too, Dave says, scanning the darkness with his light. He's right. The night should be noisy with frogs and insects, but everything's quiet. In the beam of our flashlights, we can see fish swimming in tight circles, like they're trapped in invisible walls. A group of herons that usually nest here is completely gone. I test the water temperature, pH, oxygen levels, everything I can think of. None of the readings make sense. According to my equipment, the water has more oxygen than it should be able to hold, and its chemical makeup keeps changing every time I test it. Then we hear it, a sound like rushing water, but wrong somehow. We turn our lights toward the noise and freeze. About 50 feet away, the surface of the swamp is rising up in a column, like a water tornado in reverse. That's not the scariest part. The water is deep red now, and as we watch, it twists itself into shapes that look like letters. Dave, I whisper. Please tell me you're seeing this too. He nods slowly. What? What do you think it's trying to say? Before I can answer, something dark moves under the water near our feet. Not a gator, I know their movements by heart. This is something else. The water around it turns red as it passes, leaving a trail of bloody-looking water that spreads out in a pattern too perfect to be natural. My radio crackles, making us both jump. It's filled with static, but through the noise, I hear words that chill me to the bone. The mangroves. They're bleeding. Actual blood. Need backup. The voice belongs to Jenny, one of our newest rangers. She's stationed near the ancient burial grounds, about 2 miles from here. As her words fade into static, the water at our feet starts to move. Not like normal currents. This is deliberate, like fingers reaching for us. We need to get to Jenny, I say, already backing toward our vehicles. But first I need to get something from my office. All my research about the swamp's consciousness, the patterns I've been tracking, I think I finally know what they mean. Dave looks at me like I'm crazy, but he's just seen water-form letters in the air. Right now, crazy theories are all we've got. As we hurry back to our trucks, I glance over my shoulder one last time. In the fading beam of my flashlight, I swear, I can see the water rising up again, forming not just letters this time, but a face. A face made of blood-red water, watching us leave. And somehow, deep in my gut, I know it's not letting us go. Whatever's in these waters, it's been waiting for a long time. And now that it's shown itself, it wants to be known. The drive back to my office takes forever. Every canal and pond we pass is turning red, like the whole swamp is filling with blood. Dave follows close behind in his truck, and I can see him constantly checking his mirrors. We're both waiting for something to follow us. We find Jenny's truck parked near the burial grounds, but no sign of her. The radio just gives us static now. As we get out of our vehicles, a thick mist rises from the water. It smells wrong. Not like normal swamp gas, but like old blood and decay. "Jenny!" Dave calls out, his voice shaking. "Jenny, where are you?" That's when we see it. Rising from the water like a nightmare come to life is something. At first, it looks like a massive dark shape, like the stories I've heard about the skunk ape, Florida's version of Bigfoot. But this is worse. Much worse. The creature is made of swamp water and blood, its body constantly shifting and flowing. Where its face should be, there's a swirling mass of red water forming features that keep changing. Long arms made of liquid reach out from its body, dripping red drops that turn the water around it crimson. "Don't move," I whisper to Dave, but it's too late. The thing has seen us. The water around our feet suddenly comes alive. Tendrils of red-tinted liquid shoot up like snakes trying to grab our legs. We jump back, but the water follows us, moving in ways water shouldn't be able to move. The creature, I don't know what else to call it, glides across the water's surface. Everywhere it passes, the swamp changes. Plants twist and writhe, dripping with blood-like sap. Fish swim in perfect formations behind it, like they're under its control. Even the current changes direction, now flowing in circles around us. "The truck," Dave says. "We need to," before he can finish, a wall of bloody water rises between us and our vehicles. The creature makes a sound, not quite a roar, not quite a splash, and more water tentacles burst from the swamp. They're everywhere now, cutting off every escape route. In the chaos, I spot something in the water near the burial mounds. Old stones with markings on them, usually hidden under the water, are now visible. The symbols on them look like the patterns I've been seeing in the water currents. That's when it hits me. This thing isn't just controlling the swamp. It is the swamp. Or at least it's what the swamp has become. The creature moves closer, and I feel a pressure in my head, like something trying to speak directly into my mind. Images flash through my thoughts. Ancient ceremonies performed in these waters, old magic mixing with the natural forces of the swamp, and something sleeping here for centuries, growing stronger, more aware. "Dave," I say slowly, "remember, my research about swamp consciousness, I think I was right, but not in the way I thought. The entity towers over us now, its water-formed body blocking out the moon. A tentacle of bloody water reaches for my face, and when it touches my skin, it's warm, like living blood. Through the mental connection, I understand more. This thing has been here since before humans came to these lands. It's been absorbing everything, the minerals in the water, the blood of every creature that died here, the ancient rituals performed on its banks, and now it's awake, hungry, ready to take back its territory. As if to prove its power, the creature makes a gesture. The water near the burial mound swirls and parts, revealing something that makes my heart stop. Jenny's ranger badge, floating in the crimson water. But no Jenny. The thing in front of us isn't just some swamp monster. It's something older, something that's learned to control not just water, but blood itself. And right now, looking into its fluid face, I realize we're not dealing with a creature that can be fought with normal weapons or science. We're dealing with something that's been part of these waters since the beginning, and it wants us to know that we're in its world now. Everything happens fast after that. I radio for backup, and soon 3 more rangers arrive: Tom, Sarah, and Rico. But instead of helping, their presence just makes things worse. The creature seems angry now. The bloody water rises higher, forming dozens of tentacles that whip through the air. Tom tries to run, but a wave of red water catches him, pulling him under. Sarah screams and races toward him, but she disappears too, swallowed by the crimson swamp. "It's protecting the burial ground," I shout over the roar of moving water. "Everything started when they began planning to build that new visitor center." "Here!" Rico's voice shakes as he responds. "So what do we do?" I think fast, remembering everything I know about water chemistry, about swamp ecosystems, about the research I've done on consciousness in wetlands. The creature is powerful, but it's still connected to the swamp. It still needs the water to survive. "The treatment tablets," I yell to Dave. "In my truck, the ones we use to clean contaminated water." Dave understands immediately. While Rico and I distract the creature by moving away from the burial grounds, Dave makes a dash for my truck. The entity sends water tentacles after him, but he's too quick. The creature seems to sense our plan. The red water churns violently, and suddenly Rico is lifted off his feet by a massive wave. I watch in horror as he's pulled into the bloody swamp just like the others. Dave returns with my water testing kit, his hands shaking as he holds out the tablets. They're meant to purify water, making it safe to drink by killing harmful organisms. But I'm betting they'll do more than that to this water. We have to get closer, I say. Right into the heart of its territory. Dave looks at me like I'm crazy, but he nods. Together we wade into the red water, even as more tentacles form around us. The liquid is warm now, almost hot, and thick like soup. Every step feels like walking through quicksand. The creature towers over us, its fluid body blocking out the sky. In my head, I feel its rage, its determination to keep its territory safe, to punish those who would disturb the ancient burial grounds. "I understand now," I say to it, even as I grip the tablets. "You're not just a monster. You're the swamp itself, aren't you? Everything that's ever lived and died here all mixed together, becoming aware." The pressure in my head increases. Images flood my mind. Centuries of history, of life and death in these waters. I see the truth. The creature isn't evil. It's a guardian, protecting sacred land the only way it knows how. But I also see the bodies of my friends, floating in the red water. This can't continue. With shaking hands, I drop the tablets into the water around us. The effect is immediate. Where the tablets dissolve, the red water turns clear. The creature shrieks, a sound like rushing water and breaking glass, and its liquid body begins to dissolve. "I'm sorry," I whisper, "and I mean it. But you can't keep killing people." The creature thrashes, its water tentacles whipping wildly. One catches me across the face, leaving a cut that bleeds into the swamp. As my blood mixes with the water, something strange happens. Instead of feeling afraid, I feel connected, like I can suddenly understand the swamp on a deeper level. The entity's form collapses, the red water clearing wherever the tablet spread. But as it disappears, I feel it leave something behind. A kind of awareness flowing into me through my blood in the water. Not its full consciousness, but a piece of it. A connection to the swamp that I know will stay with me forever. When it's over, the water is clear again. We find the others, Tom, Sarah, and Rico, unconscious but alive on the bank. They don't remember what happened to them. Maybe that's for the best. Dave helps me bandage the cut on my face. "What do we tell people?" he asks. I look out over the now peaceful swamp. "The truth," I say, "at least part of it. That this land is special, sacred, and that sometimes the best thing science can do is recognize when something should be left alone." Later, they cancel the plans for the new visitor center. The burial grounds remain undisturbed. And if sometimes, late at night, I see the water move in strange ways or feel a familiar presence in my mind when I'm near the swamp, well, that's between me and the water, because now I know the truth. The swamp is alive. Maybe not in the way it was when the creature was here, but alive all the same. And through the blood I left in its waters that night, a part of me is alive in it too. Some mysteries, I've learned, aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be respected. And sometimes the most important discovery a scientist can make is knowing when to let the mystery be. Story 3. I should have known something was wrong when Rex refused to go on our morning walk. My dog never says no to walks, not in rain, not in snow, and definitely not on a nice fall morning like this. But there he was, hiding under my bed, whining like a puppy. "Come on, buddy," I called out, shaking his favorite treats. "What's gotten into you today?" Rex just stared at me with those big brown eyes and stayed put. I didn't think much of it then. I wish I had. My name's Jack Miller, and I've been a park ranger at Acadia National Park for 15 years now. Every morning I walk these trails, checking on hikers and making sure everything's okay. It's peaceful work most days. Just me, the trees, and usually Rex. The locals call me the trail man because I know every path and shortcut in this park like I know my own face in the mirror. This morning started like any other. The fog was rolling in from the ocean. Nothing unusual for Maine in the fall. I could smell that salty ocean air mixing with the sweet scent of dying leaves. The crunch of those red and orange leaves under my boots was familiar and comforting. Birds were singing their morning songs somewhere in the trees. I pulled out the old silver flashlight Mary gave me before she passed. 2 years since cancer took her, but I still carry this flashlight everywhere. It's become a habit to check if it's working each morning, even when I don't need it. The fog was getting thicker than usual, though, so I kept it handy. "Just you and me today, Mary," I whispered, patting the flashlight. Yeah, I talk to myself sometimes when I'm alone on the trails. 15 years of solo patrols will do that to you. Before this, I was a firefighter in Boston. Funny how life changes. From rushing into burning buildings to peaceful morning walks in the park. But something felt different about today's fog. It was thicker somehow. Heavier. Usually I can see at least 30 feet ahead. But now, I could barely make out the trees 10 feet in front of me. The bird songs were fading too, which was odd for this time of morning. I've learned to trust my gut over the years. It saved lost hikers more times than I can count. And right now, my gut was telling me something wasn't right. The air felt wrong, like the calm before a storm, but worse. I clicked on Mary's flashlight, its beam cutting through the fog. The moisture in the air made the light bounce back in weird ways, creating shadows that seemed to move on their own. I shook my head, trying to clear those thoughts. "Get it together, Jack," I muttered. "It's just fog." But somewhere deep down, I knew Rex had been right to stay home. Something was different about today. Something was watching. I just didn't know it yet. But this normal fall morning was about to become the scariest day of my life. The first weird thing I noticed was the footprints. I was walking along Pine Trail, one of our most popular hiking paths, when my flashlight caught something strange in the mud. At first I thought they were just regular footprints. We get hundreds of hikers every day. But these were different. They looked human, sort of, but way too long. Like someone with size 20 feet had been walking around. And they were deep in the mud, deeper than they should be. I've seen bear prints, deer prints, all sorts of animal tracks, but nothing like this. I took out my radio to call it into base. "Hey, Tom, you there? Got something weird out here on Pine Trail." The radio crackled with static. Loud, angry static that made me jump. That wasn't normal. We'd just checked all the radios yesterday. "Tom, anyone copy?" More static, but this time I heard something else in it. Something that sounded almost like breathing. I clicked the radio off fast. My hands were shaking a little and I felt stupid about it. I'm 40 years old, for crying out loud. I've dealt with angry bears and rescued people from cliff edges. A bad radio signal shouldn't spook me like this. But then I saw it. Something white moving in the fog just at the edge of where my flashlight beam could reach. It was tall, whatever it was, and it moved in a way that made my stomach turn. Not like a person walks, not like any animal I know, more like someone had grabbed a piece of paper and twisted it. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Ranger Miller. Is anyone there?" The fog swallowed my words. It was so thick now that water was dripping from the trees, but it wasn't raining. Hadn't rained all week, actually. So why were the trees dripping? That's when I found the backpack. It was a normal hiking backpack, bright blue, probably belonged to some tourist. But it looked like someone, or something, had squeezed it flat as a pancake. Not torn, not ripped. Just flattened, like it had been put through a giant press. Inside the backpack, everything was crushed. The water bottle was paper thin. The granola bars were powder. Even the metal carabiner clips were squished flat. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not through the radio this time. This was closer, much closer. But it didn't sound quite right, not like normal breathing. It was wet somehow, like someone breathing through jelly. I spun around, shining my flashlight everywhere. But the sound seemed to come from all directions at once. The fog was moving weird now, too. Instead of drifting like normal fog, it was swirling in ways that fog shouldn't move, like something was pushing it around. My compass was going crazy, the needle spinning in circles. The air started to smell like rotten eggs, making my eyes water. And there, caught on a branch at eye level, I found a piece of torn jacket. It was still warm. The birds had stopped singing completely now. The forest was dead silent except for that weird breathing sound and the drip, drip, drip from the trees. Even the wind had stopped. I've spent my whole life in these woods. I know every sound they're supposed to make and every sound they're not supposed to make. Right now, nothing sounded right. Rex knew. That smart old dog of mine knew something was wrong this morning. And now, standing there in that twisted fog with that thing breathing somewhere nearby, I realized just how right he'd been. I needed to get back to my truck and call for help. But as I turned around, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Long, pale white fingers sliding through a crack in the rocks. Fingers that kept getting longer and longer and longer. I couldn't move. Those white fingers kept stretching through the crack in the rocks, each one as long as my arm now. They were pale like milk and looked soft, almost like rubber. My whole body was screaming at me to run, but I stood there frozen, watching. Then, my radio burst to life with static again, and that broke the spell. I turned and ran as fast as I could back down the trail. Behind me, I heard a sound like someone pulling wet clay, a thick, stretching noise that made me run even faster. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. That's normal up here in parts of the park. But right now it felt like the worst luck in the world. Think, Jack, think, I whispered to myself. I needed to be smart about this. Whatever that thing was, it was in my park, and people could be in danger. That's when I heard someone crying. "Hello?" I called out, moving carefully toward the sound. "This is Park Ranger Miller. Do you need help?" The crying got louder. It sounded like a woman, maybe a young one. But something was off about it, like when you hear a recording of someone crying being played backwards. I followed the sound to a small clearing. The fog was so thick here I had to hold my hand in front of my face to see it. The crying seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then I saw the shoes. They were hiking boots, good ones, scattered across the clearing. But they weren't just dropped there. Each one was squished completely flat, like the backpack I'd found earlier. And beside them was a trail of something that looked like clear jelly, shining in my flashlight beam. My radio crackled again. This time, through the static, I heard Tom's voice. Jack, you there? We've got reports of 3 missing hikers. Family of 3 didn't come back from their morning walk. You seeing anything weird out there?" I pressed the talk button, but all that came out was that awful static. Then, very faintly through the noise, I heard that backwards crying sound again, coming from my radio. I clicked it off fast. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. That's when I noticed the trees. Something was wrong with them. The fog was clearing a little, and I could see that some of the trunks had gaps in them. Not holes exactly, more like the trees had been squeezed in the middle, like someone had grabbed them and pinched them nearly flat. The gaps were about as wide as a person. I heard a twig snap behind me. When I turned around, the fog was moving again. Not like before, but worse. It was swirling into a shape, a tall shape. A human shape, sort of, but wrong, all wrong. I raised my flashlight, and for the first time I saw the whole thing clearly. I wish I hadn't. It was white as paper and tall as a tree. Its body looked like silly putty, stretching and twisting as it moved. Where its face should have been, there was just smooth white skin. But worst of all were its arms. Long, rubbery things that kept unfolding like a paper chain, reaching for me with those horrible white fingers. And then it made that crying sound again. Not from a mouth. It didn't have one. The sound just came from its whole body like it was some kind of awful speaker. I did the only thing I could think of. I shined my flashlight right at it. The creature jerked back like I'd hit it with a baseball bat. Its whole body rippled, and it made a high-pitched sound like a tea kettle. The beam from Mary's flashlight seemed to hurt it. That's when I remembered something from my firefighter days. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. I had 3 road flares in my emergency kit, and now I knew exactly how to use them. But first, I had to find those missing hikers. And somewhere in this fog, my friend Tom was still answering calls on his radio, not knowing what was really out here. I gripped Mary's flashlight tight and started walking. I had a plan now. I just hoped I would live long enough to use it. The light was my only weapon, so I kept my flashlight on and moving. Every shadow could be that thing. Every sound made me jump. But I had to keep going. People needed help. I followed the trail of sticky goo the creature left behind. It led me deeper into the park, towards the old cave system tourists aren't allowed to visit. The caves were dangerous, full of tight spaces and dead ends. Perfect hiding spots for something that could squeeze itself flat. That's when I heard real crying, human crying, coming from behind a big oak tree. "Hello?" I called softly. "I'm Ranger Jack. I'm here to help." A small face peeked out from behind the tree. It was a teenage girl, maybe 14 or 15. Her clothes were dirty and torn, and she was shaking like a leaf. "It took them," she whispered. "It took Mom and Dad. I'm going to get you out of here," I promised. "Can you tell me what happened?" She nodded, still trembling. "We were just taking pictures of the sunrise. Then the fog came, and that thing, it just reached out and grabbed Dad. Its arms got so long. Mom tried to save him, but it grabbed her too. I ran. I just ran." She started crying again. "You did the right thing," I told her. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Okay, Sarah, I need you to be brave for a little longer. Can you walk?" She nodded again. "Good. Stay close to me and stay in the light. That thing doesn't like bright lights." We started walking back toward the ranger station, my flashlight sweeping back and forth. Sarah stayed so close she was almost stepping on my heels. Then my radio crackled again. This time it was Tom's voice, clear as day. "Jack, I'm at the cave entrance. Got some weird reports about holy." His voice cut off in static. Sarah grabbed my arm. "What was that?" I handed her my flashlight. "Hold this. Don't let it go, no matter what. I've got another one in my pack." I pulled out my backup light, not as strong as Mary's, but it would have to do. Then I took out the road flares and handed one to Sarah. "If you see that thing, light this and throw it at it. Then run toward the ranger station. You remember the way?" She nodded, clutching the flashlight and flare. "Go now. Stay in open areas and keep the light on." "What about you?" "I have to help my friend." I watched until Sarah was safely on her way, then turned toward the caves. The fog was thicker here, almost solid. The beam from my backup flashlight seemed weaker too, like the fog was eating the light. That's when I saw it. A ranger hat on. The ground. Tom's hat. Next to it was a trail of that clear slime leading into the cave's mouth. The dark opening looked like a giant mouth, ready to swallow me whole. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The cave walls were wet with more of that slime, and I could hear something moving deeper in the darkness. Something big. My light caught something white moving ahead. But this time, I was ready for it. The creature unfolded from a crack in the wall like a piece of paper coming through a printer. Its body rippled and stretched, reaching for me with those horrible rubber band arms. But now I knew its weakness. I grabbed my first road flare, struck it against the cave wall, and threw it right at the thing. The bright red light filled the cave, and the creature screamed, a high, twisting sound that made my teeth hurt. It backed away from the flare, trying to squeeze itself into the cracks in the wall. But I could hear more movement behind it, deeper in the cave, and what sounded like human voices. Tom was in there somewhere, and Sarah's parents too. I had one more flare, my flashlight, and a crazy idea. I just hoped it would be enough. The red light from the flare made crazy shadows on the cave walls as I moved deeper inside. Every few steps, I'd hear that wet stretching sound, like someone pulling taffy. But the creature stayed just out of sight, hiding in the darkness ahead. "Tom," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you hear me?" A muffled sound came from somewhere deeper in the cave. It could have been Tom, or Sarah's parents, or something else. The flare's light was getting dimmer. Soon it would go out and I'd be left with just my backup flashlight. I needed to think fast. That's when my foot hit something soft. Looking down, I saw a pile of clothes. Dozens of them, all flattened like they'd been ironed. Some looked old, falling apart. Others were newer. In the middle of the pile was Tom's ranger jacket, crushed flat as paper. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe. This was its nest. All these clothes. How long had this thing been taking people? A noise behind me made me spin around. The creature was there, hanging from the ceiling like a horrible white spider. Its body was twisted in a way that made my stomach turn, bent in places where nothing should be able to bend. I raised my flashlight, but it was ready this time. One of its long arms shot out, knocking the light from my hand. It clattered away into the darkness, the beam pointing uselessly at the wall. Then I heard Tom's voice, weak but clear. "Jack, over here." He was behind the creature, trapped against the far wall. Next to him were two other people, had to be Sarah's parents. They were stuck to the wall with some kind of clear slime, like flies in a spider web. The creature moved toward me, its body unfolding and stretching. That awful crying sound filled the cave again, but now it sounded almost happy, like it was pleased to have caught another victim. I backed up slowly, my hand reaching for my last road flare. The creature followed, its blank face tilted like it was curious. One of its arms reached for me, fingers spreading out like a fan. Then I remembered something important. When I was a firefighter, we used emergency strobes to signal each other in dark, smoky buildings. The bright, flashing lights could be seen through almost anything. And I still had my old emergency strobe in my pack, along with some batteries I'd meant to change out this morning. If this thing hated regular light, how would it handle strobing light? I just had to reach my pack without getting grabbed. The creature was between me and my fallen flashlight, and the first flare was almost dead. Time was running out. I looked at Tom and Sarah's parents, still stuck to the wall. Then I thought of Sarah, hopefully safe and heading toward the ranger station. And finally I thought of Mary's flashlight, lost somewhere in the darkness of the cave. I had one chance to get this right. Taking a deep breath, I reached for my pack. The last flare was dying, its red light getting weaker by the second. Had to move fast. I yanked my pack off and grabbed for the strobe light, but one of the creature's arms shot out, wrapping around my leg. It felt cold and soft, like wet rubber, and it started pulling me toward its twisted body. With my free hand, I managed to grab the strobe. The creature's other arm reached for me, its fingers spreading out like a giant white fan. "Hey!" I shouted, hoping to distract it. "You want to know something? My dog knew you were out here. And dogs are smarter than people sometimes." Its blank face turned toward me, like it was actually listening. That gave me the second I needed. I clicked on the strobe light. The bright flashing light filled the cave like lightning. The creature made a sound I'll never forget. Not a scream, but more like the noise a balloon makes when you let all the air out at once. Its whole body started shaking and twisting. The arm around my leg loosened, and I broke free. I rolled away, keeping the strobe pointed at the thing. Its white skin was rippling like crazy, and it started trying to squeeze itself into the wall cracks, but the strobe light seemed to confuse it. It couldn't figure out which way to go. "Jack!" Tom called. "The slime! It's getting looser!" He was right. The flashing light was affecting the sticky stuff holding them to the wall. Tom managed to pull one arm free. I grabbed my fallen flashlight and Mary's flashlight too, then pulled out my phone. The light from its screen wasn't much, but right now every bit of light helped. The creature was pressed against the far wall now, trying to hide from all the light. Its body was folding in on itself like a piece of paper being crumpled up. "Tom!" I tossed him my backup flashlight as soon as his hands were free. "Help me get them out." Together, we pulled Sarah's parents free from the weakened slime. They were scared but okay. The mom hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. "Sarah?" her dad asked, his voice shaking. "Did you see our Sarah?" "She's safe," I told them. "I sent her to the ranger station, but we need to move. Now!" We all pointed our lights at the creature, forcing it further back into the cave. It was making that tea kettle whistling sound again, shrinking away from the lights. "Everybody out!" I shouted. "Fast as you can!" We ran for the cave entrance. All our lights pointed backward. The creature followed at first, but stopped when it hit the edge of the fog. It just stood there, its body swaying like a tree in the wind. The morning sun was burning through the fog now. The creature retreated back into its cave, becoming harder to see in the darkness. I knew it wasn't dead. Things like that don't die easily. But now we knew how to fight it, how to keep it away from people. Later that day, we set up powerful lights all around the cave entrance. Police came and more rangers. Sarah was reunited with her parents. That was the best part. Even Rex came out of hiding and seemed happy again. We never found any trace of the creature after that day, but sometimes, when the fog rolls in extra thick, I think about those flattened clothes in its nest. How many others had it taken before we knew how to stop it? I still walk the trails every morning with Rex. Still carry Mary's flashlight too. But now I carry something else. A bright strobe light with fresh batteries. Just in case. Because the fog is rolling in again today, and Rex is hiding under my bed. And somewhere in the deep parts of the park, I swear I can hear something crying. Story 4. I've been a park ranger at Carlsbad Caverns for 23 years, and I never believed in monsters until the rocks started moving on their own. My name is Timothy Foster. I'm a geologist by training and a cave expert by necessity. Most days, I guide tourists through the safe parts of our caves, tell them about stalactites and stalagmites, and make sure nobody gets hurt. But what happened last summer changed everything I thought I knew about these caves, and about our world. It started with the sounds. Usually, caves have their own kind of quiet, the soft drip of water, the occasional flutter of bat wings, the whisper of air through tunnels. But that Tuesday morning in June, I heard something different, something wrong. It was like the rock itself was humming. I was doing my morning check of the main cavern when I first noticed it. The sound reminded me of someone running their finger around the rim of a wine glass, but deeper, coming from everywhere at once. I switched off my flashlight and stood completely still, listening. In 15 years of studying caves, I'd never heard anything like it. Must be some new underground stream, I told myself, but deep down I knew better. Water doesn't make rocks sing. I radioed back to the visitor center. "Hey Sandra, any seismic activity showing up on the monitors?" "Negative, Tim. Everything's quiet as a mouse." "Why?" I clicked my flashlight back on, sweeping the beam across the limestone walls. "Probably nothing. Just thought I heard something weird." But it wasn't nothing, and it wasn't just the humming. Later that day, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a formation in the main chamber. We called it the Queen's Throne because it looked like a giant stone chair. I'd seen it every day for years, except now it was different. The whole formation had shifted about 3 feet to the left. Now let me tell you something about cave formations. They don't move. Not in human lifetimes anyway. They grow, sure, but we're talking fractions of an inch over hundreds of years. 3 feet in less than 24 hours. That's impossible. I should have reported it right away. Should have called in experts, closed the cave, done something. But who would believe me? I already had a reputation for being obsessive about the caves, especially after what happened to my brother Tom. Tom was my younger brother, and he died in a cave collapse 10 years ago. I was supposed to be with him that day, checking a new tunnel system in Colorado. But I called in sick and he went alone. They never found his body. After that, I threw myself into studying cave safety, got certified in everything I could, learned about rock structures, underground stability, you name it. My wife used to say I was married to the caves more than to her. Guess she was right since she left last spring. But all that knowledge, all those years of experience, none of it prepared me for what I found next. In a remote section of the cave system, one that's closed to tourists, I discovered something that shouldn't exist. Tool marks on the cave walls. Fresh ones. Except they weren't made by any tool I'd ever seen. The cuts were too precise, too clean, like they'd been carved by diamond. And next to these marks I found something else. A handprint pressed into solid rock like it was soft clay. A handprint twice the size of my own. That's when the tremors started. Small at first, just tiny vibrations in the ground. But they had a pattern to them, almost like footsteps. Heavy footsteps, moving through solid rock. I knew I should leave. Every instinct told me to get out of there. But instead, I took out my geological survey equipment and started taking readings. If something was happening to my caves, I needed to know what. The readings made no sense. The seismic patterns were unlike anything I'd ever seen. They seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was almost alive. As I stood there staring at my instruments in disbelief, the humming sound returned. Louder this time. And now it seemed to be coming from the wall right in front of me. The solid limestone wall that, impossibly, was beginning to ripple like water. That's when I realized the caves weren't just caves anymore. Something was waking, up in the deep places of the earth. Something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time, and it knew I was there. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that handprint in the stone. By morning, I had convinced myself I needed to check it again, just to be sure I hadn't imagined things. The morning shift hadn't started yet when I entered the cave. The tourist paths were empty, and my footsteps echoed off the walls. I carried my usual gear: helmet, flashlight, radio, water bottle, and my tablet with all my geological equipment hooked up to it. The weight of it all felt comforting, normal, scientific, but what I found was anything but normal. The handprint was gone, not worn away or covered up, just gone, like it had never been there. But that wasn't the strangest part. The whole tunnel had changed. Where yesterday there had been a narrow passage, now there was a wide chamber. And the walls, they were covered in crystals I'd never seen before. They grew in spiral patterns, glowing faintly in my flashlight beam with a deep red color. "Sandra," I called into my radio, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you at the desk yet?" Static answered me. I checked the signal. Usually it was perfect this close to the main chamber, but now, nothing. I took out my tablet and started taking pictures, measurements, anything I could record. The crystals seemed to be growing even as I watched. Not quickly, maybe a millimeter every few minutes, but that's still thousands of times faster than any crystal should grow. Then I heard voices. "Hello?" I called out. No answer, but the voices continued. A low murmur that seemed to come from deeper in the cave. It sounded like people talking, but muffled, like hearing a conversation through a wall. I followed the sound. I know. In horror movies, this is when everyone yells at the screen for the character to turn back. But I'm a park ranger. If there were people down here, in an off-limits area, it was my job to find them. The voices led me to a part of the cave system I'd never seen before. That should have been impossible. I knew every inch of these caves. But here was a whole new tunnel sloping down at a gentle angle. The walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural, like they'd been polished by giant hands. The temperature dropped as I descended. My breath came out in white puffs and the tablet's thermometer showed 45 degrees Fahrenheit, way too cold for this depth. Suddenly, my tablet started going crazy. The seismic sensors were picking up movement everywhere, like the whole cave was shifting around me. But I couldn't feel anything. The ground under my feet was solid. That's when I saw the footprints. They were pressed into solid rock like footprints in wet sand, each one nearly 2 feet long. They led deeper into the tunnel, and they were fresh. The edges were still crumbling like whatever made them had just passed by. I should have left. Should have run straight back to the surface and called in every expert I could find. But then, I heard something that made my heart stop, my brother's voice. Tim, help me. It was impossible. Tom had been dead for 10 years, I knew that. But I'd know his voice anywhere, and it was coming from somewhere up ahead. Tom? My voice cracked as I called out. The only answer was a deep rumble, like distant thunder. But we were hundreds of feet underground. There shouldn't be any thunder here. The rumble grew louder, and now I could feel it in my feet. The smooth walls started to vibrate. Pebbles skittered across the ground. My helmet light flickered. Then I saw it. A shadow moving in the darkness ahead. Something huge. Something that shouldn't exist. The shadow shifted, and for just a second, my light caught what looked like an arm. But it wasn't an arm made of flesh and blood. It was made of living stone, crystals growing and shifting across its surface like rippling muscles. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, back up the sloping tunnel, heart pounding in my ears. Behind me, the rumbling grew louder, and I could hear something moving, something massive coming after me. The tunnel started shaking violently. Rocks fell from the ceiling. I ducked and weaved, decades of cave experience guiding my feet. But the thing behind me wasn't just following. It was changing the cave itself. I could hear rock grinding against rock, feel the tunnel shifting around me. I burst out into the main chamber just as the morning's first tour group was coming in. They stared at me. This crazy-looking ranger, covered in dust, gasping for breath. "Is everything okay, Mr. Foster?" asked Mike, one of our regular guides. I looked back at the tunnel I'd just come from, but it wasn't there anymore. The wall was smooth, solid limestone, like the passage had never existed. "Yeah," I managed to say. "Just checking some unusual readings," but I knew what I'd seen. And I knew that whatever was down there in the deep parts of the cave, it wasn't just changing the tunnels, it was watching me. I spent the next week trying to convince myself I was going crazy. Maybe the stress of the divorce had finally gotten to me. Maybe I needed a vacation. But then the research team arrived, and everything got worse. They came because of the earthquakes. Small ones at first, so small that only our most sensitive equipment could detect them. But they had a pattern. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead scientist, showed me the readings in the visitor center. "See this, Mr. Foster?" She pointed to lines on her computer screen. "These aren't natural tremors. They're too regular. Almost like footsteps," I finished. She looked at me strangely. There were 4 of them. Dr. Chen, 2 graduate students named Mike and Jenny, and a cave expert named Dr. Roberts. They set up their equipment in the main chamber, right near where I'd seen the Queen's throne move. "Fascinating mineral formations," Dr. Roberts said, examining the wall with his special camera. "I've never seen crystals grow in this pattern before." I wanted to tell them everything, about the moving rocks, the vanishing tunnel, the thing I'd seen. But I kept quiet. They were scientists. They needed evidence, not crazy stories. But on their 3rd day in the cave, Jenny disappeared. We were all checking different sections when Mike's voice crackled over the radio, panicked. "Jenny's not responding. She was just here a minute ago." I ran to their location, heart pounding. They were in a narrow side tunnel, one I knew well. Mike was shining his light everywhere, calling Jenny's name. "She was right behind me," he kept saying. She was right. There. We searched for hours, called in rescue teams, used every piece of equipment we had. But Jenny was gone, like she'd vanished into thin air, or into solid rock. That night, I heard the singing again. Not the high-pitched hum from before. but a deep rhythmic sound that made the coffee cups rattle in the break room. Dr. Chen's equipment went crazy, showing tremors all through the cave system. "We need to get out," I said. "Now." But Dr. Roberts wouldn't listen. "This could be the geological discovery of the century. We need to—" The lights went out. All of them. Our headlamps, the emergency lights, everything. And in the darkness I heard something moving. Something big. "Nobody move," I whispered. But then we heard Jenny's voice. "Help, please, I'm stuck. Can anyone hear me?" "Jenny." "Mike," shouted, and I heard him running toward the voice. "Mike, wait!" But it was too late. The ground started shaking. Not like before, this was violent, purposeful. I heard Mike scream, then a sound like grinding stone. Dr. Chen's flashlight flickered back to life just in time for us to see. The wall was moving, not cracking or falling, moving like it was alive. And there, half buried in the living rock, was Mike. He was conscious, staring at us in terror as the stone slowly pulled him in. "Help!" he gasped. "Please!" Dr. Roberts grabbed his arm and pulled. I grabbed too. But it was like trying to pull someone out of hardening cement. The rock kept moving, kept pulling, and our flashlights showed something else. A massive shape, forming in the wall behind Mike. A huge humanoid figure made of stone, its crystal eyes glowing red in the darkness. We pulled harder. Mike screamed. And then he was gone. The wall was solid again, smooth like nothing had happened. But now we could all see the creature clearly as it stepped out of the stone. It was like a huge person made of rock, but the rock was alive, shifting and flowing like water, crystals growing and dissolving across its surface. It had to be at least 9 feet tall. And those eyes, they weren't just glowing. They were studying us. Dr. Chen was frozen, her scientific mind probably refusing to accept what she was seeing. Dr. Roberts started backing away slowly, but I couldn't move, because carved into the creature's chest was a symbol. The exact same symbol I'd seen in the photos from the cave where my brother disappeared. The creature reached out one massive hand, and the walls around us started to shift and flow. New tunnels opened up, old ones disappeared. It was changing the entire cave around us, and we were trapped inside. "Run!" I shouted, finally finding my voice. "Back to the main chamber." We ran, but the cave wasn't the same anymore. Every tunnel was different, every turn unfamiliar, and behind us we could hear it coming. The slow, steady footsteps of something massive, and the terrible sound of stone grinding against stone. What had we awakened in these caves? And what did it want with us? I was about to find out. And I was going to wish I hadn't. We ran until our legs burned, but the caves kept changing around us. Every time we thought we found a way out, the tunnels would shift and move. It was like being in a maze where the walls kept rearranging themselves. "This is impossible," Dr. Chen kept saying, her flashlight beam dancing wildly across the walls. "Stone doesn't move like this. It can't." But it was moving. And somewhere, behind us, that thing was still coming. Dr. Roberts stopped suddenly, pointing his light at the ground. "Look!" There were more footprints in the stone floor, but these were different. They were human-sized, and they looked old, very old. And there were dozens of them, all heading in the same direction. "We're not the first ones to see this thing," I said, my throat dry. "People have been down here before, maybe centuries ago. That's when we found the cave paintings. They covered the walls of a large chamber we stumbled into. Paintings done in red and black, showing huge figures, made of stone walking among normal-sized people. Some of the stone figures were helping the humans build things. Others were teaching them how to work with metal and stone. But the newest-looking paintings showed something else. The stone creatures going to sleep, sealing themselves inside the earth as humans watched. "They're not just creatures," Dr. Chen whispered, her scientific mind finally accepting what we were seeing. "They were here first. They taught us things, and then they went away." A deep voice rumbled through the chamber. "Until you woke us." We spun around. The stone creature stood in the entrance to the chamber. Up close, it was even more impossible. Its body constantly shifting and changing, crystals growing and dissolving. Across its surface, its face was roughly human-shaped, but with sharp crystal angles instead of soft features. Dr. Roberts panicked. He turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The creature raised its hand, and the rock wall behind Roberts started to move. "No," I shouted, "please." The creature turned its glowing eyes to me. When it spoke again, its voice was like grinding boulders. "You seek answers, Timothy Foster." It knew my name, and suddenly I knew, really knew, why my brother's body was never found in that cave collapse. "Tom," I said, my voice shaking. "What happened to my brother?" The creature's crystal eyes flickered. "He found what you have found, but he was not ready for the truth. Few humans are." "What truth?" The walls around us started to glow with a deep, red light, and images formed in the stone like moving pictures. They showed cities, incredible cities made of crystal and stone, built inside massive caverns. And walking through these cities were more creatures like the one before us. "We were the first," it said. "Before your kind crawled from the seas, we shaped this world. We taught your ancestors our secrets, some of them. But your kind grew violent, greedy. You turned our teachings to destruction. So we slept, deep in the earth, waiting. Waiting for what?" Dr. Chen asked. "For the right time. For the right humans." Its eyes fixed on me again. "Your brother understood in the end. He chose to join us." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, join you?" Instead of answering, the creature touched the wall. The stone rippled, and there, stepping out of the solid rock, was Tom. But he wasn't human anymore. His body was like the creature's, made of living stone and crystal. But I could still see my brother in his face, in the way he moved. "Tim," he said, and his voice was a strange mix of the brother I knew and the sound of shifting stone. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, but now you can understand. Now you can see what they showed me." I stepped back, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. Dr. Chen gripped my arm, either for support or to keep me from running. I'm not sure which. "Your kind stands at a crossroads," the first creature said. "You dig deeper into the earth, disturbing our sleep, unleashing forces you cannot control. Soon you will either destroy yourselves, or you will be ready to learn our secrets again." Tom reached out his stone hand to me. "Stay, Tim. Learn. Like I did." I looked at his hand. The hand that used to help me up when I fell, that taught me how to climb, that waved goodbye the last time I saw him human. And I knew I had to make a choice. Not just for myself, but for everyone up above who had no idea what was stirring in the deep places of the earth. What I chose next would change everything. But as I stood there looking at my stone-transformed brother and feeling the weight of ancient secrets pressing down on me, I realized something terrible. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of making the wrong choice or the right one. I stared at Tom's stone hand, still reaching out to me. Behind me, Dr. Chen was whispering "fascinating" over and over, while Dr. Roberts had pressed himself against the wall, like he was trying to disappear into it. "Show me," I said finally. "Show me everything." Tom's crystal eyes brightened, and the first creature, the one who had found us, nodded slowly. The walls of the chamber started to move again, but this time they weren't closing in. They were opening up, revealing a passage that glowed with soft blue light. "Follow," Tom said, his voice still that strange mix of human and stone. We walked down the glowing tunnel, and with each step the cave opened wider until suddenly we were standing at the edge of something impossible. It was a cave, but calling it just a cave would be like calling the Grand Canyon just a hole in the ground. The chamber was huge, bigger than any cave I'd ever seen. Our flashlight beams couldn't even reach the ceiling. And in this massive space was a city. Not ruins, not remains, but a living, glowing city made of crystal and stone. Towers spiraled up into the darkness. Bridges of pure crystal connected different levels. And everywhere there was light. Not electric light, but light that seemed to come from the stones themselves. "Welcome," Tom said, "to the first city." As we walked through the streets, I saw more of them, the stone people. Some were huge, like the first one we'd met. Others were smaller, closer to human size. They moved through the stone walls like we move through air, and the whole city seemed alive, constantly shifting and changing. "This has been here all along?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Right under our feet?" "Many cities sleep beneath your world," the first creature explained. "This one guards the knowledge, the history of Earth before your kind." We passed what looked like a school, where young stone beings, if you could call them young, were learning to shape crystal with their thoughts. In another building, I saw them studying what looked like maps of the inside of the Earth. "But why show us now?" I asked. "Why take Tom? Why take Jenny and Mike?" Tom's stone face turned sad. "We don't take anyone, Tim. We offer. Jenny and Mike. They weren't ready. They panicked, tried to fight against the change. That's why they're sleeping now, deep in the stone, until they're ready to understand." "Understand what?" We had reached the center of the city. There, in a huge open square, was something that made my heart stop. It was a model of Earth, but not like any globe I'd ever seen. This one was made of living crystal, and it showed things underneath the surface. Huge networks of tunnels and chambers spanning the entire planet. "Your kind grows too quickly," the first creature said. "You dig too deep, build too recklessly. Soon you will break into chambers that should stay sealed. Unless we help you guide them," Tom finished. Now I understood. They needed people like us, people who knew the surface world, who could help prevent disasters before they happened, who could slowly, carefully, help humanity understand what really lived beneath their feet. "That's why you chose Tom," I said, "because he was a cave expert, and now me." "And me," Dr. Chen stepped forward, her eyes shining. "I want to learn. I want to understand." But Dr. Roberts finally found his voice. "This is insane. We can't just turn into stone monsters. We have to tell people. The world needs to know." The first creature turned to him, its crystal eyes flaring. "The world is not ready. Tell them, and they will come with machines and weapons. They will destroy themselves trying to destroy us. Is that what you want?" That's when I noticed something about the crystal Earth model. There were red spots glowing all over it, places where human mining and drilling were getting too close to these hidden cities. One of those spots was directly under a major city. "How long?" I asked. "How long until someone digs too deep?" "Months," Tom said. "Maybe weeks." I looked at my brother's stone face, at the ancient city around us, at the incredible knowledge these beings had kept safe for millions of years. Then I thought about the world above, about all the people who had no idea what their machines were about to unleash. I knew what I had to do. But first I had to make sure. If I join you," I said carefully, "can we really help? Can we stop what's coming?" Tom reached out his hand again. "Together, brother, like we always did." I took a deep breath and looked at the others. Dr. Chen was nodding eagerly. Dr. Roberts was shaking his head in terror, and somewhere above us a world of humans kept digging deeper, not knowing what waited in the dark. I made my choice, and nothing would ever be the same again. I reached out and took Tom's hand. The moment our hands touched, I felt it, a tingling sensation that started in my fingers and spread up my arm. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was the strangest thing I'd ever felt, like my whole body was waking up from a long sleep. "Wait!" Dr. Roberts screamed. He pulled out his phone, the one piece of equipment that still worked down here. "I'm recording all of this. The world needs to know." Before any of us could stop him, he hit send on a message. Somewhere up above, his findings were already spreading across the internet. The first creature's eyes flared bright red. "The choice has been made," it rumbled. "Not by us, but by him." The ground started shaking, not like before, but violently, dangerously. Cracks appeared in the crystal city's walls. Tom pulled me close as pieces of the ceiling began to fall. "What's happening?" I shouted over the noise. "The city is sealing itself," Tom explained. "All the cities are. We have to finish your change, now, or you'll be trapped up there when everything closes." Dr. Roberts tried to run, but the stone floor beneath his feet suddenly turned soft. He sank into it like quicksand, screaming. "Stop!" I yelled. "Save him!" The first creature shook its massive head. "He has chosen his path as you must choose yours now." Dr. Chen grabbed my other hand. "We have to do this, Tim. We have to learn their knowledge, help protect both worlds. It's the only way." She was right. I could feel it in my bones, or maybe in the stone that was slowly replacing my bones. The change was already starting. I'm sorry, I whispered to Dr. Roberts as he sank deeper into the floor. His eyes were wide with terror, but I knew he would sleep safely in the stone, like Jenny and Mike, until he was ready to understand. The city was collapsing around us now, not destroying itself, but sealing itself away, deeper than anyone would ever dig. The knowledge had to be protected. The sleeping cities had to stay hidden until humanity was truly ready. Tom squeezed my hand tighter as the change spread through my body. It didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like finally becoming what I was always meant to be. I watched in amazement as my skin turned to living stone, as crystals grew along my arms and chest. The surface world must be protected. The first creature, even from itself. That will be your task, Timothy Foster. You and your brother will guard the borders between our worlds. I looked at Tom, seeing him clearly now through my new crystal eyes. We had work to do, important work. Keeping humans from digging too deep in dangerous places. Protecting ancient secrets until the world was ready for them. Being guardians of two worlds. The last thing I saw before the city sealed itself completely was Dr. Chen's face as she changed too, her expression full of wonder, as crystal patterns spread across her cheeks. She would help us study, help us understand both sides of our new existence. Now, years later, I still walk through these caves. To the tourists, I'm just a legend, the ranger who disappeared mysteriously. They tell stories about me around campfires, never knowing that I'm right there in the walls, watching, protecting. Sometimes, late at night, I visit the surface. My stone body looks human enough in the darkness. I check on my ex-wife, make sure she's happy in her new life. I monitor the mining company's plans, gently nudging them away from sleeping cities with a few well-placed cave-ins or unstable geology reports. And sometimes, deep in the sealed cities, Tom and I talk about the future, about the day when humanity might be ready to know the truth about what lives beneath their feet, about the real history of our world, kept safe by creatures of living stone. But until then, we wait and watch and protect. And if you're ever in a cave and think you hear stones moving behind you, or see crystals glowing where they shouldn't be, well, don't be afraid. It's probably just me, doing my job, making sure both worlds stay safe, making sure everyone sleeps soundly, whether in their beds or in the heart of the living stone. Story 5. The day Sarah Miller disappeared was just like any other perfect summer day at Lake Superior State Park. At least that's what I thought at first. I'm Mike Thompson, one of the park rangers here, and I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, but nothing like what happened that summer. I remember standing on the beach that morning watching the sunlight dance on the water. Something felt off. The lake was too calm, like glass. In my 15 years of watching these waters, first as a lifeguard and now as a ranger, I'd never seen it quite like this. No ripples, no waves, just stillness. Mr. Mike, little Tommy from the campground came running up to me, his yellow swim trunks covered in sand. "Can you teach us more about the rescue rope today?" I smiled, pushing away my unease. Teaching kids about water safety was my favorite part of the job. After saving a dozen people from drowning over the years, I knew how important these lessons could be. "Sure thing, buddy. Let me grab my gear from the station." My station was actually my home, a small ranger's house right by the beach. Living alone had its perks. I could keep an eye on the lake at all hours. Lately, I'd been doing that more than usual. Something about the water had been bothering me, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Inside, I grabbed my whistle and rescue rope, then paused to look at my journal. Its pages were filled with weird things I'd noticed recently. Water moving the wrong way, strange sounds at night, unexplained ripples. Most rangers kept logs of wildlife sightings. Me? I documented the impossible. Back on the beach, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. The sky was that brilliant Michigan blue that tourists love to photograph. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries carrying on the fresh breeze. Families had spread their colorful towels across the warm sand, and a few small boats bobbed far out on the horizon. Kids splashed in the shallows, their laughter echoing across the water. But something wasn't right. The lake felt different, alive somehow, like it was watching us. I'd grown up around water, learned to read its moods like most people read the weather. Lake Superior was the biggest, deepest lake I'd ever worked on, and it had its own personality. But lately, that personality had changed. The water had started doing things it shouldn't. Just yesterday, I'd seen waves moving against the wind. A small thing, something most people wouldn't notice. But I noticed, just like I noticed how the water level would rise on perfectly clear days, or how sometimes the lake water tasted salty, which was impossible for a freshwater lake. As I walked back to Tommy and his friends to start the lesson, a chill ran down my spine. The water near the shore was dead calm, except for one spot. A single, perfect circle of ripples, like something was pushing up from below. I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. They hadn't. They were all too busy enjoying their perfect summer day, not realizing that something was very, very wrong with Lake Superior. I squeezed my rescue whistle, drawing comfort from its familiar shape. After 15 years of water rescue, I thought I'd seen everything. But deep down, I knew. This summer would prove me wrong. Terribly wrong. "Okay, kids," I called out, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "Who wants to learn how to throw a rescue line?" A dozen eager hands shot up, and I started my lesson, trying to ignore the way the water seemed to pause and listen. Because that's impossible, right? Right? It started with the footprints. I was doing my morning beach walk when I saw them. Wet footprints on the big rocks near the pier. Nothing strange about footprints, except these were going straight up the rocks. Straight up, like someone had walked up a wall. And they were fresh, water still dripping down from each print. I touched one. The water was ice cold. "Hey, Mike," called a voice behind me. I turned to see Linda Chen, one of our summer lifeguards, jogging over. She was smart and level-headed. Exactly the kind of person you want watching over swimmers. You need to see something weird. I followed her to the lifeguard tower, where she pointed at her clipboard. 3 people reported the same thing yesterday. They said they felt like they were drowning, but they weren't even in the water. They were just standing on the beach. My stomach did a flip. "Show me where." Linda led me to a spot near the swimming area. Nothing looked unusual, just regular sand and pebbles. But when I knelt down to touch the ground, my chest suddenly felt tight. It was like someone had wrapped a cold, wet rope around my lungs and squeezed. I jerked my hand back, and the feeling went away. "See?" Linda said. "It's like the air itself is trying to drown you." Over the next few days, more strange things started happening. Small whirlpools appeared in perfectly calm water. Fish washed up on shore, completely dry inside. No water in their gills, like they'd somehow drowned in air. And kids kept saying they saw someone walking on the lake early in the morning. But when parents looked, there was never anyone there. I started keeping track in my journal. Monday, water moved uphill near the boat dock. Not flowing, more like it. Was being pulled. Tuesday, 3 more dry drowning spots found on the beach. Wednesday, lake water tested salty again. Called water treatment plant. They're as confused as I am. Thursday saw strange bubbles rising from the deep part of the lake. They moved in straight lines, like something was walking down there. But the scariest thing happened on Friday. I was teaching a group of kids about wave patterns when little Emma, age 6, started crying. "The water's grabbing me," she screamed, backing away from the shore. But she was a good 10 feet from the water's edge. I ran to her, and that's when I saw it. A thin stream of water was snaking across the sand, moving like a living thing. It was reaching for Emma's ankle. I scooped her up. Just as the water touched her foot, she shivered violently in my arms, her skin ice cold where the water had made contact. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my window, watching the lake under the moonlight. The water was moving strangely, forming shapes that looked almost human. Before collapsing back into waves, I picked up my phone to call the park supervisor, then put it down. What would I say? That water was moving by itself, that people were drowning on dry land, that something was walking around in the lake? They'd think I was crazy, but I knew what I saw, and I knew that whatever was out there in Lake Superior was getting bolder, more dangerous. Linda was the only one who believed me. She came to my house that evening and we spread out all my notes on the kitchen table. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to my map of the dry drowning spots. "They're all getting closer to the swimming area. Whatever this is, it's hunting." A loud splash from outside made us both jump. We ran to the window just in time to see something impossible. A column of water rising from the lake, shaped like a person. It stood there for a moment, turning slowly, like it was looking right at us. Then it collapsed back into the waves, leaving only ripples behind. Linda's hand found mine in the dark. "Mike," she whispered, "what are we going to deal with?" I squeezed her hand back, my mouth dry. "I don't know, but we need to figure it out fast before someone gets really hurt." As if answering us, a low moan drifted across the water. Not the wind, not the waves, but something else. Something that shouldn't exist. The water walker was coming. The next morning started with screams. I was making coffee when I heard them. By the time I got to my front door, Linda was already there, out of breath. "2 kids," she gasped. "The Peterson twins, they're in trouble." We ran to the beach together. Small crowd had gathered, pointing at something in the water. No, not in the water. Above it, Jack and Jenny Peterson, both 10 years old, were floating 3 feet above the lake's surface. They weren't moving, just hanging there, wrapped in what looked like ropes made of water. Their faces were turning blue. I didn't think, I just acted. "Linda, get the hot water tanks ready," I yelled, remembering how the creature had avoided the warm spots near the park's drainage pipes. Then I grabbed my rescue rope and ran straight into the lake. The water was so cold it felt like needles in my skin. As I waded deeper, I felt that familiar squeezing in my chest, like something was trying to pull the air from my lungs. But I kept going. "Hey!" I shouted at the lake. "Let them go!" The water around me started to move, not like normal waves, more like it was alive. It swirled, in rows forming a shape that looked almost human, but it wasn't human. It was made entirely of water, clear as glass except for 2 dark spots where eyes should be. The water walker. It turned those dark eyes on me, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My vision started to go dark around the edges, but I forced myself to focus on what I came for. The kids. They were still floating, but now I could see they were crying, scared but alive. "Linda, now!" I managed to shout. From somewhere behind me came a huge whoosh. Linda had opened the park's hot water tanks, sending a stream of steaming water right at the creature. Where the hot water hit, the water walker's body seemed to lose its shape like ice melting. It made a sound like a scream mixed with the roar of a waterfall. The water ropes holding Jack and Jenny disappeared, and they dropped toward the lake. I caught Jenny, and Linda, who had waded in after me, caught Jack. We pulled them back to shore as fast as we could. Behind us, the water walker was reforming itself, but now it looked angry. The water around it began to churn and rise. "Everyone off the beach!" Linda shouted, helping me get the twins to safety. "Now!" People ran as a wave bigger than any Lake Superior should have rose up behind us. It crashed down just as we reached the shore, sending water all the way up to the parking lot. When the water pulled back, the water walker was gone. But it had left a message, written in wet sand where the wave had reached. Mine. The twins were okay, just cold and scared. Their parents hugged them and cried while the paramedics checked them over. But I couldn't relax. This was just the beginning. That night, Linda came over again. We sat on my porch watching the lake. It looked calm now, but we knew better. "It's getting stronger," Linda said quietly. "And now it's not hiding anymore." I nodded. "Did you see how it reacted to the hot water? It's the only thing that seemed to hurt it. But we can't heat up the whole lake." "No," I agreed. "But maybe we can trap it somehow. Force it into a spot where we can hit it with enough heat to drive it away for good." Linda was quiet for a moment. "The deep spot," she said. "Finally, near the old drainage pipes, if we could lure it there." A splash in the distance made us both jump. Out on the lake, a figure made of water rose up tall as a tree. It stood there for a moment, watching us. Then it raised an arm and pointed straight at Linda. The message was clear. It had heard our plan, and it wasn't happy. Linda's hand found mine again, squeezing tight. Neither of us said what we were both thinking, that we might be in way over our heads. But what choice did we have? If we didn't stop this thing, more people would get hurt, or worse. The water walker sank back into the lake, leaving behind ripples that somehow moved in straight lines toward shore, toward us. "Mike," Linda whispered, "whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." She was right, but as I watched those unnatural ripples getting closer, I had a terrible feeling that we were running out of time. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Linda and I spent every moment we could planning. We mapped out the hot water pipes, checked the weather reports, and kept watch over the lake. But the water walker didn't show itself. "Maybe it's gone," Tommy said hopefully when he saw me staring at the water during his swimming lesson. I wished I could believe that. But the lake felt different now, heavier somehow, like the air before a thunderstorm. And the water, it was watching us. I could feel it. Then Sarah Miller disappeared. She was just taking her morning walk along the beach, something she did every day. The only trace we found was her phone, sitting on a rock. Next to it was a puddle of water shaped like a handprint. That's when the water walker decided to show us what it could really do. I was in my house when I heard Linda scream. Running outside, I saw something impossible. The lake water was moving, uphill, flowing up the beach like a snake. But this wasn't just a small stream like before. This was like a river flowing backward, splitting into dozens of water tentacles that reached for anything they could grab. People ran screaming as the water chased them. It caught some, wrapping around their legs and pulling them down. Not into the lake, just down onto the dry sand. But when it touched them, they started gasping like they were underwater. "The hot water!" I yelled to Linda, who was already running for the control panel by the visitor center. "Turn it on." She never made it. A column of water rose up in front of her, taking the shape we'd come to fear. The water walker stood there, tall as a tree, its body clear as glass but somehow dark at the same time. Where its face should be, there were just those two deep dark spots that looked like eyes. Linda tried to back away, but water shot up from the ground behind her, turning to ice and trapping her feet. "No!" I ran toward her, but more water rose, forming a wall between us. Through it I could see Linda, but distorted, like I was looking through a twisted window. She pressed her hands against the water wall, her eyes wide with fear. "Mike!" she shouted. Then the wall of water moved, flowing around her like a bubble. She banged against it, but it didn't break. Instead, it started carrying her toward the lake. I ran along the beach, trying to keep up. "Let her go!" I shouted at the water walker. "Take me instead." It turned those dark eyes on me, and suddenly all the water pulled back, including the bubble holding Linda. For a moment, everything was still. Then the water walker raised its arms, and the lake itself seemed to rise up. A wave bigger than any I'd ever seen built up, towering over the beach. And caught in the middle of it was the bubble holding Linda, her face pressed against its side in terror. "Please," I begged. Don't. The water walker's face changed. It wasn't quite a smile, more like ripples spreading across its watery features. Then it brought its arms down. The wave crashed onto the beach with the force of a truck. I dove behind a big rock, holding on as water rushed past me on both sides. When it finally pulled back, Linda was gone. The water walker stood at the edge of the lake, watching me. Then it did something new. It spoke. The voice wasn't like anything human. It sounded like water moving over rocks, like waves crashing, like ice cracking. All at the same time. Mine now, it said. All mine. Then it melted back into the lake, leaving me alone on the wet sand. I looked out at the water, my heart pounding. Linda was out there somewhere, and Sarah Miller, and maybe others. We didn't even know about yet. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. A message from Linda's phone, somehow still working underwater. Hot pipes, deep spot, hurry. She was alive, and she was telling me where to find her. I looked back at my house, where my rescue gear was. I'd need more than just ropes this time. I'd need a plan, because the water walker had shown us what it could do. Now it was our turn to show it what we could do. Looking at the lake, I made a promise. I'm coming, Linda. Just hold on. The water rippled in response, almost like laughter. The water walker thought it had won, but it didn't know what I'd do to save my friend. And it didn't know about the plan we'd made, a plan that would use its own power against it. I just hoped we'd all live long enough to see it work. I had 1 hour before sunset to save Linda. My hands shook as I spread out the park's maintenance maps on my kitchen table. The old drainage pipes Linda mentioned ran deep under the lake, carrying hot water from the park's treatment plant. They all met at one spot, the deepest part of the lake, about 50 feet down. That's where Linda's message came from. That's where the water walker was keeping them. I grabbed my phone and called Tommy's dad, who worked at the treatment plant. Mr. Reed, I need your help. Can you turn the water temperature up as high as it'll go? Mike, that's dangerous. Those pipes weren't made for... Please, I cut in. Linda's life depends on it. Sarah Miller's too. There was a long pause. Then, give me 20 minutes, I gathered what I needed. My wetsuit, underwater flashlight, and a special tank I'd rigged up. Instead of air, it was filled with hot water. My backup plan if things went wrong down there. As I worked, I heard splashing outside. Looking through the window, I saw more people being dragged into the lake by water tentacles. The water walker was getting greedy, but it was also getting careless. I noticed something it hadn't. Every time it pulled someone in, it had to connect to the hot water pipes to reach the deep spot. And those pipes were about to become very, very hot. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Reed. Pipes at maximum temperature, be careful. It was time. I ran to the beach, where chaos was everywhere. Water tentacles grabbed at people, pulling them toward the lake. But now I could see the pattern. They all disappeared at the same spot, right above the deep water. Hey, I shouted at the lake. Remember me? The water in front of me rose up, forming into the water walker's shape. It looked bigger now, fed by all the people it had taken. Come to join them? It asked in that horrible water voice. Something like that, I said, and ran straight at it. It was exactly what it wanted. Water wrapped around my legs, pulling me down and forward. I fought just enough to make it seem real, but let it drag me into the lake. The water was freezing cold, and that familiar crushing feeling hit my chest. But this time I was ready. I had my hot water tank, and I knew what to look for. Down we went, deeper and deeper. The water walker pulled me past underwater cliffs and drops, following the path of the hot water pipes. Even in the dim light, I could see other shapes floating in bubbles nearby. People, still alive, but trapped. Linda was among them, her eyes wide when she saw me. Finally, we reached the deepest part. It was like an underwater cave, with the pipes running right through the middle. And there, trapped in a huge bubble, were at least 20 people. Everyone the water walker had taken. The creature formed, itself in front of me, its watery face twisted in what looked like a smile. Your hot water can't help you down here, it said. Too deep, too cold, too much pressure. I smiled back. Want to bet? I reached for the valve on my tank. But before I could turn it, something hit me from behind. Another shape made of water. There was more than one water walker. The second creature wrapped around me like a snake, squeezing. My flashlight dropped, spinning as it fell. In its beam, I saw more water shapes forming. 3, 4, 5 of them. Not separate creatures. I realized, but parts of the same thing. Could split itself apart. Fool, the main water walker said. This is my domain, I am everywhere here. Really? I gasped. Then you're also? I pointed at the pipes. Right on cue, they started to vibrate. The water walker turned to look. That's when Mr. Reed's work hit. Superheated water burst from every pipe joint, shooting out like fire hoses. The water walker screamed. All its parts screamed at once, a sound like 1,000 waves crashing. The creature holding me let go. The bubbles holding the people started to break apart, but we weren't done yet. The water walker rushed at me, its many parts coming together into something huge and horrible. Now! I yelled, hoping Linda would understand. She did. She and every other person kicked hard for the surface the moment their bubbles broke. The water walker started to go after them, but I had one last trick. I turned the valve on my tank all the way open, sending a jet of hot water right into the creature's face. The scream this time was deafening, even underwater. The water walker's body began to break apart, chunks of it turning to steam as the hot water hit. But I was running out of air. Black spots danced in my vision as I kicked for the surface, hoping I had enough strength left to make it. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the water walker dissolving below me, its many parts scattered by the hot water still shooting from the pipes. Then something grabbed me. But these hands were warm, human. Linda. I woke up on the beach with Linda's face hovering over me. Breathe, she was saying. Come on, Mike, breathe. I coughed up what felt like half the lake, my chest burning. But I was alive. Around us, people. We're helping other people stand up. Sarah Miller was there, shivering but okay. Tommy's dad was wrapping blankets around the rescued swimmers. Ambulances were pulling into the parking lot, their lights flashing in the growing dark. Did we? I tried to ask, but started coughing again. You did it, Linda said, squeezing my hand. The hot water worked. It broke apart into little pieces, and each piece turned to steam when the hot water hit it. It's gone. I looked out at the lake. The surface was calm now, but something bothered me. All the pieces, are you sure? Linda helped me sit up. Well, most of them. Some might have escaped into deeper water, but the pipes are still hot. It won't come back to this part of the lake, at least not until winter when the water gets cold. Again. She was right. We'd driven it away, saved everyone it had taken. That would have to be enough for now. The next few hours were busy. Paramedics checked everyone over. Police took statements, though I noticed they wrote down unexpected current and mass hallucination instead of water monster in their reports. But the people who had been there, who had seen it, we knew the truth. A week later, the lake was back to normal. Families played on the beach again, kids splashed in the shallows, everything looked perfect. Linda and I stood on the pier watching the sunset. Do you think it's really over? She asked. I thought about the water walker, how it could split itself into parts, how some pieces might have escaped. No, I said honestly. But we know how to fight it now. We know its weakness. And next time, we'll be ready. Next time, Linda repeated softly. Just then, something caught my eye. Far out on the lake, where the water was deep and dark, a single ripple spread in a perfect circle, like something was rising from below. But before either of us could say anything, it was gone. Linda's hand found mine. We stood there watching the lake, knowing that somewhere in its depths, the water walker was waiting, growing, planning. But that was a problem for another day. For now, the lake was quiet, the people were safe, and the sun was setting on another beautiful summer evening at Lake Superior State Park. I squeezed Linda's hand and turned away from the water. But I kept my rescue whistle around my neck just in case, because in this job, you never know what might come up from the deep. And the lake is always watching. That night in my journal I wrote, Water Walker defeated, for now. Weakness. Heat signs to watch for. Water moving against the wind. Drowning feelings on dry land ripples in perfect circles. Water that tastes like salt-wet footprints going up next time. We'll be ready. But I hope there isn't a next time, because some things should stay in the deep water, and some lakes should be left alone. I closed my journal and looked out my window at the dark water. For a moment, I thought I saw two deep, dark spots looking back at me from the surface of the lake, but when I blinked, they were gone. Probably just my imagination. Probably the end.